Hey there, welcome back to our Sky Tonight program. My name is Seth Mayo. I'm the curator of astronomy for the Loman Planetarium. And in this week's coverage of the night sky, we're looking at the dates of August 30th through September 5th. What we'll talk about for this week is Venus getting really close to the star Spica. And then we'll look in the early morning sky where we'll find the moon moving past some interesting celestial objects. And then for the rest of the episode, we'll talk about the upcoming celestial events and what the night sky looks like for the month of September. So, let's get to it. If you've been looking in the west lately just after sunset, you may have noticed that really bright object in that area of the sky, and that of course is Venus. And Venus, as you know, is the brightest planet that you can see from Earth, so it really shines. And what's kind of nice about Venus, it's going to get very close to a celestial object that we spent some time talking about in the last episode, and what I had a chance to talk about in my virtual presentation when I did our Ask Our Curator of Astronomy program. I had a chance to talk about the star Spica, which is getting lower in the sky. It's starting to set at this time of the year. Spica is part of that constellation called Virgo, the Maiden, which I should be able to turn on that constellation right here in Stellarium, and there's the whole picture of Virgo. But right near one of the hands of Virgo is a star right there. That's the brightest star in the constellation. That is Spica. And if you do check out the last episode, I talked about Spica being a binary star system. They're very close to each other, the two stars that make up this system, which is about 250 light years from us. So as we go through the rest of the week, you'll see Venus kind of creep closer and closer to this star. And so we're going to the next day here, Tuesday evening, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we get to Friday, Saturday, and then eventually Sunday. You'll see that Venus has gotten really close to it. That's actually Sunday the 5th, right there. And so you can see the planet Venus just above the star Spica that we find just below it. So that's kind of nice to find those two objects, Spica, the 15th or 16th brightest star in our night sky, with Venus, the brightest planet, just above it. They're quite low in the west, but it's a nice pair to look at if you're gazing toward that part of the sky. Now in this program, I never want to forget those who are early morning risers. Maybe you get up at the crack of dawn to walk your dogs or to exercise or just to take a stroll, or maybe you're getting ready for work and the only time you have a chance to see the stars, the moon, and the planets are in the early morning, which is okay as well. It just looks a little different than the evening sky. So this is actually on Tuesday morning, still at the beginning of the week. And what's nice is the moon will be in this area, and I always love the moon in the phases you're about to see here. On the morning previous to this, Saturday morning on August 29th, we actually had a last quarter moon. That's when the moon was half full. And from our perspective, you saw the left side of the moon being lit by the sun, while the right side was in shadow in darkness. And it was much closer to the constellation of Taurus the Bull up here. So by Tuesday morning, this is around 6 o'clock local time, you'll find the moon still pretty high above the eastern sky, but now in its waning phases, getting smaller and smaller in its appearance. So as we go through the week here, we'll get to Wednesday morning, September 1st. You'll see it continue to descend closer to the eastern horizon. We then get to Thursday morning, and by then, the moon, being a thin crescent, will be situated inside the constellation of the Gemini Twins, this prominent wintertime grouping of stars. Here are the Gemini Twins you find right there. And what's kind of cool is that the moon will be near the brightest stars in Gemini, the heads of the twins, also the names of these two characters from Greek mythology. The star I have highlighted here is Pollux, as it indicates in the top left, and the brother here that you find there is Castor. So this is Thursday morning when the moon is right inside of Gemini. As we continue on Friday morning, you'll find the even thinner crescent moon just below the brightest star in Gemini of Pollux that we find right there. And we'll continue on here as we see the moon descend lower and lower in the sky, getting to a thinner and thinner crescent. And then by the 5th, this is Sunday morning. If you're up early before sunrise, you'll see a very, very thin crescent moon right there. And I think that's a nice sight to see, especially those who have a clear, very low view of the eastern horizon. Maybe those who have access to a beach and are walking around. You can have a nice, very thin crescent moon among some of the other objects you find in the sky all around it. As we look ahead at the month of September, let's preview some of the celestial events that are going on. And one of the most notable ones, starting near the beginning of the month, is on September 10th, and that's when we have the opposition of an asteroid. So that's when we're closest to an asteroid, when it's closest to us and technically at its brightest. But this asteroid is not visible to the naked eye. It's one called Pallas, or 2 Pallas. The 2 references the fact that it's the second asteroid ever discovered. And if you could see this asteroid, it'd be rising in the east just after sunset. And I have it pinpointed here in Stellarium to show you where it is. Just to give you an idea of location, here in the east and southeast, you'll find Jupiter is right here, and then there is Saturn. So it's among those planets. If you've been looking at those planets, just to the left of them is the asteroid Pallas that we find right there. Now, again, you can't see it with your naked eyes, but if you have a telescope, you might be able to check this out. It's quite interesting. And so it's nice to know when asteroids get close to us as well. Asteroids are these rocky bodies not big enough to be planets or even dwarf planets. And there are many of them in our solar system. Some of the larger ones and the ones closer to us are the ones that can possibly be seen through a telescope. And here in Stellarium, we can kind of get a depiction of it right there. So that's on the 10th of September, the opposition of the asteroid Pallas that you can find in the eastern sky. What's great about the month of September is if you wait 4 more days after the opposition of Pallas, we also have the opposition of the 8th planet in our solar system, and that is Neptune. Actually, Pallas was just right up here. Neptune would be below it, and it's another object you have to have a telescope to see. But it's kind of cool to know that we're at its closest, and technically Neptune would be at its brightest because of that close proximity to us. And so Neptune being about 29 astronomical units away from us, that's about 29 times the distance between the Earth and the Sun. It's quite far away. And realistically, even through a big telescope, what you probably will just see is a little blue dot, as you see here in Stellarium. So you wouldn't see that big massive planet that sometimes you find in pictures from the Voyager missions decades ago. But it's still kind of neat to see it as this little dot, and it's very round. With a star, you'll get kind of that glistening, that sort of diffraction kind of view. But with a planet, even one as far as Neptune, it'll have more of a roundish appearance. So you will notice a difference. And that occurs on the 14th of September, the opposition of this planet. So for the next couple episodes, we will be talking about the opposition in more details of asteroid Pallas and Neptune as well. Also on the 14th of September, if we're looking towards the west, right after the sun is setting, you might have a chance to see the closest planet to our sun, and that is Mercury. And Mercury on the 14th will be at what's called greatest elongation east. That means that Mercury will be farthest east from the sun in our sky, which means it's highest in the evening. Now, Mercury is always difficult to see because it's so close to the sun and it moves so quickly. It never stays in one spot because of its very fast orbit, but you do have a chance to see it. And just for reference here, Venus is right above it. So Venus, of course, is much, much brighter, much more apparent. Mercury is not as bright and it is smaller, but you may see if you have a clear view just above that horizon there in the west after sunset. On September 22nd, get ready for the equinox. And for us here in the northern hemisphere, this is our autumnal equinox. And in the southern hemisphere, this is the vernal equinox. So for us, in this part of the world, we have the beginning of fall happening now. And in the southern hemisphere, it will be the beginning of the spring, since our seasons are flipped between the hemispheres. So at least speaking for the northern hemisphere, this is when our weather starts to cool down, at least in certain places. For us in Florida, we're just starting to get a little bit of a reprieve from the summer weather, but it still takes a little time in this part of the world. But if you want to know exactly what's happening, we'll talk more about it later. But just quickly, this is when the sun's path, which is called the ecliptic, crosses the celestial equator, Earth's equator projected out to the stars. And notice how I've turned them on here in our daytime sky on the 22nd. You'll see the sun crossing the celestial equator. Equinox means equal night. So we have about an equal amount of day and night at this time of the year. And this all relates to Earth's tilt. So now, past this point, for in the northern hemisphere, we're going to be tilted more away from the sun versus towards it as we are in the summertime. And this is the transition point between those two extremes. So equinox on the 22nd, beginning of the fall in the northern hemisphere, or the spring in the southern hemisphere. So for a general view of the night sky for the month of September, when it comes to planets and stars and constellations, if we look to the west for the month, we'll still have a great view of the planet Venus just above the western horizon after sunset. So there's Venus in that part of the sky. Also, we'll find the brightest star in our northern hemisphere sky is getting lower and lower, and that's the star that we find right here. This is Arcturus, and Arcturus is still high enough to see for a decent amount of time in the west, but like I said, is getting a little bit lower. That's part of Boötes, the herdsman, so we still have some time to view that. And also kind of nearby is the Big Dipper. For us in more southern latitudes in the northern hemisphere, the Big Dipper is getting a little bit lower in the northwestern part of the sky, and we like to use that Big Dipper, the handle to Arcturus that we find right there. As we move to the south and kind of southwest, we're going to actually see Scorpius, the great summer constellation here, the big S-like grouping of stars with the bright star Antares, the heart of the Scorpion, kind of shift to the southwestern part of our sky. As we look directly south, we'll still see kind of in the evening Sagittarius and the Teapot in that area also starting to transition from the southeast to the southwest. We're also seeing Jupiter and Saturn get higher in the south. You can see Jupiter is located here, while you find Saturn a little bit dimmer, but nearby as well right there. So they're steadily getting a little higher in the sky, a little easier to spot after sunset. And as we look really high up, you'll find that the summer triangle, these three stars here, and we can turn on the asterism of the summer triangle, those three stars will be really high up, almost straight up after sunset. And even though summer triangle and we're getting into the fall, you still have much of the rest of the year to see these three bright stars, including the three constellations you find inside of it that are pretty popular. Cygnus the Swan, we have Vega, one of the brightest stars in our sky as well, part of the Lyra the Harp, and Altair, that is part of Aquila the Eagle. And then if we shift our attention to the east, where things rise from, we're actually starting to see some of those fall constellations and stars get higher and higher. The likes of maybe Pegasus, the winged horse that has a square body. Sometimes we look for the square of Pegasus that I'm tracing out here, and I can turn on Pegasus as well to give you kind of a better view of that. Kind of trailing and connected to Pegasus are the stars of Andromeda. That's Princess Andromeda. And if you're in a dark enough location, you might be able to see the Andromeda Galaxy that's getting a little higher in the northeast. And also in the northeast, kind of northern part of the sky, we have that big W shape, the mother of Andromeda, the queen known as Cassiopeia. That's a very noticeable grouping of stars right there. So that's our evening sky. And transitioning to the early morning, we have those wonderful winter constellations that are starting to really get up there, and you can find them earlier and earlier. Of course, we have the most famous of them all, and that is Orion the Hunter that we find right here with Orion's belt, the shoulder stars, the leg stars there. We can turn on Orion, and all around Orion, those winter stars are appearing, like Taurus the bull with the star Aldebaran. Orion's belt, as you may know, points to the brightest star of all of the night sky. That, of course, is Sirius, part of Canis Major, the great dog. And Orion's dog, this is one of his here, he has a smaller one, Canis Minor, and the star Procyon there. We mentioned early in the episode, Gemini is here, so you have the Gemini twins that you find there. And another bright star I like to mention sometimes too, this is Capella, part of Auriga, the charioteer. So those winter constellations are really up there in the morning if you're looking towards east and southeast before sunrise. And that's it for another edition of our Sky Tonight program. Thank you very much for tuning in. And as always, please stop by our Museum of Arts and Sciences and our Lohmann Planetarium. We'd love to have you there. Check it online for our schedule if you want more information about that. So we hope to see you back here again. Take care and happy stargazing.